Beyond the hobby is our speaker tonight, whom we all know very well, Frank Hazelton from Flatirons and other places. And Craig's going to tell us about his, what do you call it, addiction?
Addiction to jade?
It's a love, I think.
Which is jade. And we've known he's a jade addict for years, and he keeps getting better and better at his carvings, which he has on exhibit here. Okay, Craig, it's all yours. Here.
Got it. Thank you so much, Beth. Known you for a while, and I've been to a lot of the shows that you guys have, and it's just really a pleasure to be here to talk about what I found out about jade. Usually my jade trips start, I pack the car, it takes me forever to pack the car, and I leave the house around 10 or 11 and end up here. This is at Siding, Wyoming, which is just on the other side of the border in 287, and there's a nice pull-out that I probably camped there. I just sleep in the back of the Sequoia. I'll show you the picture of that later. And this is the sky at that location. I think I just got a new camera and I was checking it out. This is the light of Fort Collins. Pardon me. Okay, now I can see. Get started. So, Wyoming Jade, a deeper look. In the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I started getting more curious about how jade forms and why is there jade in the middle of Wyoming, or in the middle of the continent. A lot of jade that I'm used to is like California Coast, New Zealand, there are all these kind of coastal regions. And why is there Wyoming, or jade in Wyoming? I'll move over here a little bit. One of my trips up there took me quite a few trips till I really started finding jade. And this was on one of the trips I went up there, and I was out in the jade fields and I found some tuolite. I don't know if you know what that is. It's kind of a pink lapidary material. And I found like 3 rattlesnakes. And there a gentleman, John Hurst from the Boulder Club, somehow had figured out that I really need to get into jade, and I needed to go to the big jade show in Casper, Wyoming, which they have pretty much every year. The Natrona County Rock Club puts on a show up there. And of course, I couldn't stop looking for jade, and it was in an area where the emerald jade is located, and so I didn't find any. So on the way back, I ended up, let's see here. This is the giant Pathfinder Reservoir. It was filling. This was back when we had a lot of water. And I brought up this slide because I was late to the jade show, and water is a big part of this story. This is the North Platte River and the Sweetwater River, both at flood stage, draining into the North Platte, heading towards Casper. And you can see it's just, I don't know, it's probably 20,000 CFS or something like that. And, oops, there's a piece, or a piece of jewelry I made out of the tuolite that I found, and turns out, like we always, have you ever heard of pink jade from Wyoming? Yeah, some of you had. It turns out it could be albite, and that's what I found out in my research for this paper, or presentation. So I ended up at the Casper show, and there was amazing green jade, all kinds of just jade displays and everything. And this is a really fine piece of apple green jade that this woman, Marcia, had. She says, "That's my jade I got, that's all I need." She was selling jade too, but that was like her piece to make pieces, to make, I forgot this, her little cabochons and stuff like that out of it. And this here is, they had a display and there's just all kinds of jade. This is really high quality jade. And then here's a couple of apple green slicks that jade like this is probably worth like $1,000 a pound, something like that, especially in a slick form when it's, the slicks are very coherent and strong material, so they're worth quite a bit. They have a kind of a specimen value also. So here we are, yeah, this is the Sequoia Inn right here. And they're really nice to me, and I've stayed there quite a few times. They gave me keys, so that's where I stay. So in the back of the Sequoia, I probably spent almost 2 years worth of nights. And it's on its last legs, but I don't want to get rid of it. So this is in Laramie. And Laramie is an awesome place to launch from. There's great Coal Creek coffee, and Born in a Barn Burger, and there's a Thai place. And I really enjoy just hanging out in Laramie. And also is the Wyoming State Geological Survey on the Laramie campus, which is the University of Wyoming, and they have this 200-pound jade slick, apple green jade slick that you can go up and touch. It's right in the lobby. And so I kind of had a mecca to there, and I was going there, I need to find out more about jade. They didn't have hardly any, there's a few downloads, but they didn't have any books or anything on jade. They have a lot of publications on more industrial minerals and that type of thing, the oil and gas and the trona. And so I was talking to the lady, she said, oh yeah, there was one guy who used to work here, he's talking about writing a jade book or something like that, and I just like, oh, okay. And then I left, and like a couple months later, I decided to work on this project here, putting this information together, and I go, oh my God, I gotta call and see if I can get that guy. Wayne Sutherland, pardon me, really cool guy. I've talked to him several times on the phone, and I'm probably going to talk some more about like some of my questions that I had, like what happened out of this, where did this come from? Wayne spent 20 years working on this report. I have it somewhere over here, and it's a technical paper on jade. It's like 180 pages, pardon me. And he finished it 2 years ago, and they had a new director at the survey, and the director kind of buried it. He doesn't really understand why. He says, well, they thought it was too long, and this woman loves to edit everything or something like that. So for 2 years, it hasn't been published. So if you like the information in this presentation I have, I want you to call or send an email to the Wyoming State Geological Survey and ask for Wyoming Jade, a comprehensive report. And what's amazing is he had it, and so he sent me a copy. I'm not allowed to send anybody a hard copy or the file, but he said you can use the information, and that it's just, it all came together because this information isn't published anywhere. And so I've been working pretty hard reading through all this, and I tried to condense a lot of information in here. I think my understanding of geology, I've taken a few classes and had seminars with like Vince Matthews, and Pete's done some, and so that's where I learned my geology. So I think my format here is kind of like my homework project. So it's not professional geology at this point. This is actually over by Little America. That's a trona plant glowing in the background right there. They run those things all night. I took a couple friends up there, and this one friend, she had gone up for the 2017 eclipse, and she wanted to go up in big fossils, and she said, but I'm not camping out anywhere without trees and water. And like we got here, there's like not many places with trees and water in Wyoming. She finally they all went to bed, and then I got the camera out, got a picture of this. So Wyoming Jade, the wonderful Wyoming Nephrite. Somebody was asking me earlier tonight about jadeite or nephrite. They're two different mineral compositions, and so Wyoming only has nephrite, so we're talking about nephrite. And here you can kind of see the ranges in color of the stones that occur all throughout different locations and areas I'll talk about. But from this side here is kind of from your left is an emerald, and then way over on the far right is a sage, and then in the middle is black, which black is some of the best. Wyoming black jade is some of the best in the world. And there's a honey olive, which sort of a honey colored jade, which I really want to get a hold of some of that someday. That's super rare, super expensive. Back in February 1945, just after the war, or I'm not sure, maybe it was later that year, Popular Science put this article out, and it started the jade rush. Prior to that, I'm sure the First Nation Americans and Native people knew about this material. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, it's just some of it, they wander around, they see some of it, they're a very rock conscious culture, I'm sure. And I'll talk some more about that. But then in the late 1800s, some cowboys found some apparently and brought it to a lapidary in like Washington or something like that. And so that's what I think is probably the first second nation or white people experience of the jade.
Jade arrowheads.
They're actually, it's kind of understood that there's no artifacts in Wyoming. Nobody's really found any. And there's one possible one up here on the table, but I'm not really sure. There's artifacts in British Columbia, China, Guatemala, Switzerland. I think Italy has some, UK, that are ground jade materials. I'll talk about it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a nice piece from my buddy Bob. This is just sort of a number. It's like basically 1 million pounds of jade have been collected from Wyoming. It's some kind of survey that Wayne did, and that's including mine and detrital jade, which is jade float in common terms. Which in British Columbia, somebody else up tonight mentioned Canadian jade. In British Columbia, Yukon, there's jade kind of all up the west coast, all the way from Big Sur on up to Alaska. And the production up there is about 1 million pounds annually, I think for like the last 20 or 30 years. So this is a pretty small amount. This is a remote location, kind of near that lake that we saw spilling in the beginning here. And this is an Edwards jade mine, and it's the best black jade in the world. No doubt about that. And there's a cuff in there that I made. And actually, there's a little trimming from the cuff, and it's so dark green it looks black. And this is Newt Edwards. He is from Billings, and his son's still alive, I believe. And there was an article that he wrote that a paper interviewed him about his dad. So he's a lapidary. And this mine, I don't know, they collected 10,000, 20,000 pounds of jade. There's actually numbers for that in this report. And it's just really sought after. And it goes for about $500 a pound these days. I got some for $25 a pound in Arizona at a rock shop. So this thing will come up as like the best way to get Wyoming jade pretty much is to buy it. Like we had a ton right over there, you know. It's but you seldom ever find Wyoming jade. And that's a quote from a guy who's been doing it all his life that lives in Casper. There's a nice slick, and I'll use that term as. Does anybody know the term ventifact? Yeah, exactly. Which, like, Antarctica is famous kind of for.
Yeah, well, in Colorado is too.
Oh.
Wind blown, yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful form of stone. And I was always told to tell people, it takes 30 million years of wind and sand to make a Wyoming wind slate. Talked to Wayne about that. He says about 10,000 years. which is, to me, that's impressive. I did put that little article out, and I was talking about when I found the Cordes Black Jade Slip, which is up there, you can check it out. Yeah, I was in Wyoming during a windstorm, which is crazy. Like, Wyoming is always windy, but when you go there during a windstorm, forget it. So I had like 3 hats on, a hoodie, I had my noise canceling headphones, and hoodie over me, and I lasted like 2 hours. And then I found a nice piece of jade, so I said, I'm like, okay, I'm done. But during that time, I got down on my hands and knees, and I wanted to see the sand blowing around, polishing the rocks, and it really wasn't. And so I'm kind of puzzled about how the mechanism of this, I mean, the evidence is clear. And here's some carvings. The little pony is from Matt Blasby, who's a very, very talented professional carver in California near Monterey. And the face on the top is Don Salt. I have a little slide information on that. And then I did that one for Viola Padilla. I think some of you might know her. Okay, where is the jade? This is a really cool map. It just sort of like explains it. I've never seen this map before. You can actually download this. I don't know if you looked at the map over here, but there's one obvious area where most of these jades are found. The red X's are in situ locations of jade where it's like, it's in the rock, you gotta dig it out. And for a long time they couldn't find any, but you can see there's quite a few, and there's a few outliers. There's even one in the Wind River Range, which is way over here. And then there's a couple over here which are near Douglas. I think these are black jade. And then there's a couple of odd detritus locations where the jade's been transported. I don't know if anybody knows Bill Hutchinson. He always told me, I found transported jade in Colorado. And I believe him, but I sort of don't believe it. So anyway, you can download this map. This is the Beaver Rim, and this was actually one of my, I'm kind of a loner in some ways, you know, I'm happy to go camp by myself, and this is what I went here on my birthday one time. You can actually get internet here, and then you go down on the other side off that edge, and it's the wagon wheel formation or something like that, and you can find jade down there. And Bill Harrison, do some of you know him? He was an old timer. He was big in the Denver Gem Mineral Show, and so I called him up, and he was saying like, oh yeah, CMS had a jade trip, or it was like Tour de Wyoming, all the petrified wood and everything. And he said, go out to that Beaver Rim, and it all fell off the edge. And I started dreaming about it. I dreamt it was like these boulders at the bottom of this cliff or something. I went down there and found a couple of pieces.
What was the name of it? Beaver what?
Beaver Rim. So this is just north of Jeffrey City. And I like to do night photography, and I saw this place way in the distance. And where we're at now is the Granite Mountains. They're post-Laramide, meaning that they're younger than our Rockies right here. And I saw these granite domes. I said, ooh, I'm gonna take that picture. I'm gonna get those rocks in the front of it. I'm gonna be a couple hundred feet from the other rocks, and I'll get the Milky Way. And so I got out there, and it was an adventure getting out there, like bulls and bad roads and all kinds of stuff. And I turned around, and this shot was here, and I'm like, oh my God, I put on my other lens, and phew, I think that's Venus.
I think you all can understand already why I want Craig to join our club so he can contribute to our calendar. Yes!
I've never heard that before. So again, Wyoming Jade is a nephrite, and these are the chemical formulas. And if any of you don't know what chemical formulas are, these are abbreviations for the elements. And there's two minerals here, and they actually come together in what's called like felted formation where you have all these little tiny fibers and they all kind of interlink. I should have worn my nice felt cowboy hat. I'm going to do that next time. And that creates just this really durable, beautiful gem. And I don't know if anybody has seen any of the Fred Ward books. He has a whole series on, there's like diamonds and jasper and rubies and emeralds. They're little pamphlets, but his definition of a gem is beautiful, rare, and durable. So like fluorite might not make it in that category, although some people like that. It's beautiful. So anyway, the thing here is you get these two minerals together and create nephrite jade. So what's the difference between a mineral and a rock? Anybody know?
Orderly internal arrangement of the specific chemical.
That's a mineral.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah,
a rock?
A rock, it can be a mineral, but it can also be, made up of many different kinds.
Exactly. That's what we're on.
Bunches of
1, 2. That's enough. It's a rock.
That's a rock.
But it's interesting. Maybe this can crystallize at once out of a hydrothermal solution. So it kind of might be a mineral in some cases. Anyway, sometimes it'll have more magnesium, and other times it'll have more iron. And that's sort of a takeaway from those formulas anyway. And, arrow points. How do you make an arrow point?
Napping?
Napping, exactly. Do you think you could nap nephrite? Nap nephrite? I heard a no, that's good. So the deal here is when you form this is actually salville agate, I think. And this is part chalcedony, part crystalline. But what I'm trying to tell you here is like, see how that's a nice straight crack? This one's all over the place. And in, there's material science, there's a whole understanding of how brittle materials break, like glass and ceramics. That's what these are. And so when you have a tortuous path like this, the material is very crack resistant. And it turns out nephrite is, well, if we say quartz has one fracture resistance of 1, then nephrite would be 226. Until the early 80s, it was the toughest material on Earth. Anything a man made didn't get there. But it turns out silicon nitride, I don't know if you've heard of that, it's like the new ball bearing material. It lasts 80 times longer than steel and is about half the weight. They put them in bicycles and all kinds of stuff now. So that's what I'm doing. It's like you could take a really nice piece of jade and you'll never crack it. In fact, one of the tests for if you have nephrite or not out on the field, and you try to kind of test it, use the sledgehammer test. And you just whack the living daylights out of it. If it breaks, it's not jade. And I did that with a big piece. I had a big piece like this. I brought it home and it broke. So anyway, some of the colors might be dependent on what these elements are in it. And this is one of Wayne's slides. He also sent me a whole presentation. He's like, you can use any of those slides. And so iron generally makes it darker, and chromium as just kind of like an impurity, it's not actually in the mineral formula, would make it nice and bright. Like emerald green will have chromium in it. But at the same time, you can't really go by elemental content being a color determinant. So here's 2 black jades. The cord is black and the Edward's black. And this is the iron. And obviously there's 3 times as much iron in the cord is black, and they're both black. So that was another conclusion that Wayne came up with, is elemental composition doesn't really tell you color.
Oh, yes.
Here's a young prairie rattler that I met, and she was upset that I was getting sage from her bush. And so I snapped a picture and went to another bush, and then there's the bitterroot flower. Does anybody know what that stone is? Is that familiar?
Banded iron formation.
Ding!
Yeah.
So, turns out Wyoming was a little different 2.7 billion, 2,700 billion years ago. And it was part of the first supercontinent. I don't know if you're familiar, you've probably heard of Pangea. I know this is probably a pretty geological savvy crowd, I would guess. There's a whole series of supercontinents, and there's a cycle of formation. They'll form at the top of the Earth. Well, let's get this on video. They'll form on one part of the Earth, and then the tectonic cycle causes to form another supercontinent down here, and then back again, roughly. And so this is the first known one, Norland, 2.7 billion years. And Wyoming actually has some really old rocks, and there's plate or parts of plates called cratons, which are really durable sections that have been around for a long, long time. And there's actually, Wayne told me there's 4 billion year old zircon crystals in Wyoming, so that's pretty rare. And so guess what? How old is Wyoming Jade? Yeah. I think, I make this statement, but I'm not an authority because I don't have any dates from any other jade. It's just a feeling. Wyoming Jade is the oldest jade in the world. I really like that. And this is some more data from Wayne's report. And I think it actually came from a different paper, but these are actually different specific locations. And then these are the data points for that. And this is a trend for when you measure a uranium clock in the rock. It's like, how do you determine how old a rock is? There's a lot of them have a clock in them. And it turns out this one is epidote. They use epidote, and you analyze the ratios of these. There's a lead isotope and a uranium isotope, and you get this curve. And so you measure those isotopes in the rock, the clock in that rock, and that's where you get here. So it's 2.5 billion. Oh my God. And then here is my shot of the Granite Mountains. So I was there, and then these alien flowers just popped up because of the time exposure. And so I was like there at just the right time. And I actually climbed on the top of that dome the next day. It's a really cool place. I'm gonna go back there. No jade. This is sort of some notes. So the Granite Mountains are pretty much the undisputed source of Wyoming Jade. And this is like 2.5 billion year old life cycle to get to us today. And so a lot of things has happened, and trying to put that whole story together is kind of difficult. And I had I couldn't find any papers on it. I didn't look really hard like somebody like Mark Jacobson. I don't know if you've heard some of his talks. He has like 20,000, or he's really good at paper research and finding references on different things. So I had Wayne do that for me. But it turns out when you have a continent-continent collision, you get uplift and burial and fractures in the earth. And that's what happened in this ancient supercontinent, Norland. And so it creates, the main things is it creates translation up and down of material of earth, rocks, and it also, there's a lot of fractures and faulting and cracks that form that you'll actually find in the jade. So if you find Wyoming jade with big cracks in it, those cracks are how old?
2.5 billion.
Yeah, exactly. So this is my homework result here. So we start out in this supercontinent that's forming, maybe like there's two continental plates that are coming together, like really old ones. But before that, there was maybe a collision with an oceanic plate. And so some amphibolite material got entrapped in it. What the heck's an amphibolite? That's like hornblende, actinolite, tremolite, augite. I think rebecite is in there as well. And so these are minerals of the calcium, magnesium, iron silicates. And guess what? That's what you make jade out of. So I did say fractures. Fractures are created by this tectonic movement, and these faults provide a pathway for fluids, maybe. So things way down deep can come up in, and what happens when you get deeper in the earth? Hotter? Exactly. So you get hydrothermal solutions, and these things are like 500 Fahrenheit, 1,000 Fahrenheit, 39,000 PSI. It's ridiculous. And so if you're like that high pressure and temperature, things start to happen. And this model here, the depth could be anywhere from 4 miles to 12 miles under the ground. And we can only, I think there's one well that's been dug to like 9,000 feet or something like that. So it's not even deep enough to make jade, I guess.
No, there are wells that are deeper than that, but not
Oh,
12 miles, yeah.
What's the deepest well that you know?
I mean, I'd say, 50,000, or maybe 30,000. I mean, there's.
Yeah, there's the deepest one I know is in the Kola Peninsula, and I forgot it came up, I need to get that number because I think that'd be kind of fun. But yeah, so say 30,000 feet, which is not 12 miles, yeah, that's, so like 6 miles or something like that. So anyway, these hydrothermal fluids have come up, and they went through an amphibolite, and they sort of dissolve it, and they create a jade nephrite soup, and it's kind of a broth. It's dissolved minerals. It's not like chicken noodle that has chunks in it. So it comes up through this amphibolite here, and it alters the amphibolite, and then it creates this green nephrite soup. And then that comes along and hits another amphibolite deposit and creates jade. And so when you alter a rock, I'm trying to get some vocabulary straight here. If you alter a rock with a hydrothermal fluid, it's a metasomatic alteration. And so then that would be, I think that would technically be a metamorphic jade at that point. I'm still kind of working on the definitions.
That's your new word for today.
Your new word for today?
Is metasomatic.
Metasomatism, right. So we just formed jade. Oh my God, that's awesome. Well, guess what? Wait, something went, I went backwards. So then it went up into this cavity, and then the pressure and temperature, say, dropped really quickly. For some reason, maybe another fracture opened up, and there's a conduit that let off some pressure. And so that jade crystallized from a solution, which really, to me, seems like a mineral formation. So that's like the jade, the mineral. And so, okay, so we got jade. What are we going to do it? How are we going to get it? It's way down deep in the earth. So the two main things, the continental collision, are fractures and transfer of material. So you got uplift. Ta-da! So uplift brings that jade to the surface, or close enough that when erosion happens, you can find the jade. or more importantly, it brings it up and it lowers the temperature and pressure so that jade doesn't turn into serpentine. Ooh, serpentine, we don't want that. It's actually a very wonderful stone, but it's not quite as durable, so maybe it's not a gem. And does anybody know what the gemstone of Wyoming is? Anybody want to guess?
Black jade.
Black.
Jade.
Black.
Yeah, all the colors.
All the colors.
Yeah. He's got a little story about that in his report. So anyway, there we go. And this is another interesting theory that, or hypothesis that Wayne presented, and I think pretty much this is his idea, but Wyoming jade, from all the things that were collected, has this really great reputation of being very durable, just a wonderful, solid material, like high grade, very fine felted. You can see different grades when you go up there, in, like probably in the box. But so this is kind of an alluvial deposit where it could have been maybe glacial. That's a whole other story. But you can see it's like these rocks have been eroded and then they got all piled up and there's like dirt in between. And this is basically what you find in the jade fields. So this would be, I'll give you dates later, but it's like maybe 40, 50 million years ago. So it all got piled up. And then it erodes a little bit. And you see, you can see my key up on the top there. I think I lost one of the colors in my construction of this slide, but say the white is not quite as nice as the really light colored one. And so you start ending up with more and more jade on the surface because all these other rocks like igneous, granites, erode much quicker. The one thing about jade, remember what's the toughest material, natural material on Earth? Toughest. Yes.
Toughest.
So it makes it very resistant to mechanical, even chemical erosion. So we just keep going, oh boy, look at all that jade just lying there. And so this is what I call just before the jade rush, which started in 1945. And then this is after the jade rush. And so there's this natural high grading of material that occurred. And so when they walked out there, there'd be like, you could probably collect 4 or 5 apple green, beautiful boulders in a day in one field back, if we go back to those days. And, it's just supposed to be amazing. And in the words of John Snook, you seldom ever find jade in Wyoming, because we're here. But what you do find is maybe a lower grade one, or one that's slightly buried, and just a little tip of a really nice one coming out. And that's sort of the reality of looking there, and people find it. This was on that same trip that I took a picture of the car in the Milky Way. That's Comet Neowise. This is from my buddy Bob's Jade Camp outside of Jeffrey City. So I think this is 2 years ago.
Is it all alluvial or is it found in seams at all?
Both, yeah. Yep. And for a long time, they thought it was all alluvial, but then they started finding, it's all in the Granite Mountains and a couple of other places. So this is a story of kind of the uplift and erosion. So this is the split rock, where is it, TSR? Split rock formation, this kind of tan color here, and there's a few other ones in here. So that's what the jade came out of. And there's like a fault system here. This is the south and north, and then there's like the Immigrant Trail, and then there was a syncline here. And so sort of the life of the granites. First, there was an uplift along here that was something like 14,000 feet. And then there's a downward in this syncline like 3,000 feet. So elevations have been changing quite a bit over the last 40 or 1,000 years. And then finally, these two both kind of like dropped. Like one went 1,000, another one went like 3,000. And so I did another homework problem graphic on it. So this is before the granites, and this is north and south. It's kind of a cross section right along here, basically, in Craig's imagination. And there's Jeffrey City right there, which is sort of Jade Central, very interesting place. And so that would be Jeffrey City. Does that orientation make sense? So this is like a slice down into the earth. So here we are, time for a mountain uplift. So here is our granite mountains. They've risen. It was like a 10 million year event, which even the Rockies here was like over 10 or 20 million years for the full uplift. I mean, it takes a while. They're so heavy, it takes forever to lift them up. And so here is our little jade that formed in our little cavities from the amphibolites. There probably still be some in there. And so they've been brought up already quite a bit. And then there's a little bit more over there. So this is sort of generally the granites now are kind of have peaks to the north of Jeffrey City. And then to the south there's kind of some more hills down here. So here we've eroded out some of the jade, and it would tend to kind of go down that way, right? So it actually went all the way over to here and formed a conglomerate, and that's where a lot of these jade boulders were placed 23 to 5 million years ago. And like over in this area is a really great place to look for jade. There's some that's where like a lot of, back in the pre-jade rush, that's where a lot of the big boulders were. Like 3,000 pound boulder of apple green, Wyoming Jade. They found those 1,000 pounds. So then the next event, so that last event was when this sunk down here, and then the whole thing dropped down 1,000 to 2,000 feet. That doesn't have a lot to do with the jade at this point, but it has, there's kind of a controversy going on in my circle. And so I interviewed like 4 people, or 3 people, oh no, 4 counting Wayne. I had a series of questions. What's your favorite boulder? How'd you get into jade? Where do you think jade came from? And we ended up with some great conversations. And then I got to Bob Scholl, my buddy, and I said, and he has been a proponent of glacial transport.
How many million years ago was that?
Right. So the whole event, the uplift was like 40 million years ago.
Yeah, but the next one.
And then there was a syncline was 3 to 5, and then we have 5 to 6, or 5 to 2 million years ago for this last down drop. These are descriptions of major form changes.
You know that Cal Ruhlman and the USGS is proposing that there was a massive ice sheet which covered the West about 500,000 years ago.
Oh,
Okay, ice sheet like Antarctica.
wow,
And so the ice might be possible.
wow. Oh, I gotta put that on there. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I want to contact him. So, so there's for and against. There's the geologist versus the prospector. And the prospector, he went to some thrift shop and found some old blue covered paper on glaciology basically, and he found kettle lakes and I forget all the names of things, but the kind of pointed shaped hills that are created.
Drumlin?
Drumlins, right, yeah, he's found some of those, and he really has a feel for what the different deposited layers are. Like there'll be like a flour layer and then like fine gravel that would be, you would expect on the top of a glacier or something like that. And I said, Bob, no, the geologists say it was all water.
Yeah,
And
I'm a
he,
geologist and I say it was ice.
wow,
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Agree.
So this is, I don't know if you've ever been to a geology presentation where like there's competing controversial views. It's alive, it's so exciting. What are you going to study about geology now? Oh, the new Western continental ice sheet. Or you know, like North American continental ice sheet.
Western North America, all the Rockies. When we look out, if you notice all the mountain tops, they're all kind of flat,
Yeah, certainly.
okay?
Yeah.
And he thinks that that's the erosional surface left by this ice sheet. That's why we're very curious about what they're finding under Antarctica and Greenland as the ice
Wow.
sheet melts back.
Right, and you'll see specific landform changes
Yeah.
from that
You
mechanism.
don't get your alpine glaciation features with a continental glacier,
Right, right.
but
Yeah, the cirques and the
he's
horns.
very much looking for that evidence, and this is good, this is good.
And so, yeah, at first I was going to say, Bob, you're wrong, Wayne's right, he's a geologist. And then I started thinking about it, and they put all these reasons and things come up. And this is an interesting here, the ice slough, have anybody heard of that? So this is on the Oregon Trail, and you could go chop out a big chunk of ice out of this. It just looks kind of, it's kind of like a, sort of a drainage on this flat area, actually back in that, where that syncline is, where, you know, sort of a broad valley, and the Squaw River goes through there. And so it was well known for, you could stop there when you're going the Oregon Trail to Oregon and pick up some ice. And so there's all these little things that are like, and there's a really cool place, Independence Rock. I don't know if you've been there, that's on the Oregon Trail. If you got, it's like this kind of low dome kind of thing, and you go to the top of it, and all these pioneers wrote their, chiseled their names into the granite from the Granite Mountains. And some of them are really cool. They're really well done. And so I was wandering around up there and I found polish. Like, oh my God, there's glacier polish. This is 2 or 3 years ago. Bob's right. And so I presented that to Wayne. I said, Wayne, or I asked him, glaciers are not mentioned in his report at all. And there's a big report that was done in the 70s, and I'm pretty sure it's not in there either, because that's where Wayne got his info. And so Wayne told me it's all wind polish, and he described a spot on the Granite Mountains that is like an 8-foot wide by 100-foot tall flute, like a river flute that's wind polished, is what he said. And I want to go see that. I don't know. So anyway, controversial. It's so exciting. And I did, in that little article in the newsletter, I talked about the mosquitoes coming up. So this is from Bob's ruby claim. There's rubies up in Wyoming. It's not such good quality. And so we drove up there. He almost dropped his truck off the road because there's really bad gullies and stuff. We got up there, and do you know the nighthawk bird? Yeah, they like fly around and eat bugs in the evening, and usually see 2 or 3 of them or something like that. And they're like bzz, bzz, bzz. You'll hear that noise, and then when they come down, you hear like they're like supersonic when they come down to get a bug. There was 100 of them below us, and I'd never seen more than 1 or 2. And they're like flying around, like, oh my God, look at all those nighthawks! That is so cool. I love it. And then we're on top of this ridge. And then they all started flying up and just going like, and there's like, whoosh, whoosh. And then the mosquitoes hit. They were all eating a big mosquito house, basically. And that's where this was. And Bob had been out in the desert for like 5 months, and he just got the back. He has like it's an old Army radio shell thing in the back, and it's all full of his gears. I can't do anything for you, Craig. And he goes, runs in there, slams the door shut. And I had magnets with, and you can't just shut the doors up there because it's hot, you know, and you'll roast in your car in the Sukhoi. And so I have mosquito netting and magnets, so I put those on the windows, open the windows of the passenger and driver's side, and so they can't get in, but I got airflow, so I won't roast to death. And so I got in there, and it was being about 200 mosquitoes or something like that. So that night it was getting dark, and I turned on the dome light, and a bunch would come up there, and I just and I got them all. I spent the night. We had found a bunch of jade that day. It was pretty magical. So it was a little bit of Colorado. Chester Howard was a lapidary guy in the CMS, and I think he was like a protege of, you know, the guy who wrote Rocks, Colorado.
Bodiorn?
I'll think of it. I have to write it down in my notes and I'll remember. Pearl. Pearl. Richard Pearl, right, thank you. They were proteges, same, you know, they probably went on the same field trips. So Jeff self-hired me to make that bola. And then here's a really cool one. There's a guy, Chuck, I can't remember his last name, but he's an old club guy. And his dad bought this unbelievable, beautiful olive bowl made by Martin Holtquist. And I got to see it. They had it's part of the GIA group I'm in. And it's just amazing. That's some of the really nice olive jade. I think that'd probably go about 400 a pound or something like that. So this is Bob, the glacier theory guy. I'm gonna have to call him up and tell him about this. And Bob was living in Lander and he got West Nile. And it hit him really hard. He was sick for a long time. And guess what? He was delirious and had hallucinations of what? Guess what? Jade, apple green jade. He was not into jade before that. And he oh God, it's like, you know, he was like dreaming about it. And then he woke up, or he finally started getting better, and that gave him a reason to get healthy again. He's like, Jade. And he lived in Lander, and there's sort of like a reputation of people in Lander, it's like, oh, we don't look for jade anymore, it's all been picked up. And so he went out in 19 days, he found a 23-pound boulder, and it wasn't really the highest quality. And then he kept finding more and more. So this is his typical office out in the desert there, and usually he finds a place with internet, and he does some graphics, design, stuff like that, so he can work, then go out and get jade. Nobody gonna bother you there. And this is one here that we call the Wyoming Wave, and it is 30 pounds. There's a piece of it in there. I bought a piece from him. I'm gonna make something out of it one of these days. And let's see, I'm just going to do a quick little change here. Pause. Just production difficulties here, not a big deal. But anyway, so Bob, I got to know him pretty well, and we've really hit it off over the years. He used to come stay at my house. And really, that's how I learned how to find jade, was through Bob.
That's not Bob.
That's not Bob.
No.
That was some background music. I had to turn that off so we can, I will have one more video. Oh, I guess it's not over here to do this way. Oh no, it's stuck. Let's try it here. There we go. And so this is the Badger boulder. This one is 18 pounds. It went for $25,000. And he found that about 20 feet from a road.
The Chinese people?
No, it actually a collector in Lander, still in Wyoming, which is kind of cool. And So this is another guy, this is John Snook. Actually, the hard liquor his dad had a lot of trouble with got him into jade. It was an interesting, I met him at that Casper show that I went to, and that's him standing in front of all the jade. He has like a yard full of jade. Oh, by the way, Bob sells jade on the internet, and John sells it on eBay, and so you can get jade through these people. But anyway, so his dad had a problem with the hard liquor, and he fortunately got to the point where he was able to do something about it, which is the minority of people in that situation. I myself made it through. And so the people he went to AA, if you ever heard of that, and they said, you gotta get yourself some new friends. You're in a bad crowd. And so he ended up, he joined the Natrona County Rock Club, and they started collecting agates, band iron, and stuff like that, and they really got into it. And John at that time, I think it was like 8 or 10 or something like that, where he had, for a very early age, he always collected rocks, like many of us, I'm sure. That was you, right? Yeah. And so then they got into jade, and then it was basically, that was the end of it. This is a piece that he made. You can actually order pieces from him. There's a leaf in this display that he made. And he makes some knives and those things. And so they ended up collecting all this jade. His dad got a mine. He used to repair a bulldozer for one of the big jade miners, and they got to get jade that way. This is a 600-pound boulder that him and his mom found, I guess. And he actually has a bunch of jade that's in Saratoga, Wyoming. Have you heard of that, with the hot springs? The museum there, I haven't been there yet, has some pretty cool jade, apparently. I'm not sure. I think it's this piece is in there. So this is breaking news. Dun, 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 dun. This is Nachalo. It also goes by Nacho, so it's a little easier to say. And Bob got her and her partner Dave into jade through some literature. There's I didn't put it out, but there's a great old lapidary journal collection called Pioneer Jade, a Jade Hunter's Story. It's a collection of articles on Wyoming Jade the articles are like 40, 50 years old kind of thing. So they gave it, and then so Nacho and her partner Dave started collecting jade. She found this about 3 weeks ago. It's a 195-pound piece of jade. It's not super high quality. And so they have 160 acres of claim. They put some association together. And there's a lot of that going on. There's another guy from Canada who's kind of like claimed up the whole state. So it's kind of, and I talked to Bob a couple nights ago, and there's a whole bunch of areas where people have just claimed up like crazy in the last couple of years. And so she's a real nice woman. So she sells jade on Etsy if you're interested. This one's available at $38 a pound, which comes out to like $5,800 or something if you need a, some people spend that much on yard rocks. I can't quite afford that, but. And there she is on the various trains. But yeah, I just kind of cold called her. I said, I know Bob. And she said, oh, sure, I'll talk. And we had a nice conversation. And she said the value of jade is a contract between the buyer and the seller. So it's not, I've been quoting these numbers for how much a pound or something like that, but it's quite variable. So this is Don Salt, and he's the father of modern jade carving. He's renowned in China. He's like a gringo going to China, and they're like, come in, show us what you do. Give us our design. He does very large stuff. And he's I took 2 carving workshops with him, which he doesn't do anymore because the green card's worn out. And which is unfortunate because his son lives in like New York, so he can't go visit his son anymore. And he lives on the coast in North Island. It's like, I forget the name of it. It's kind of, if you say it wrong, it sounds like a dirty joke. And so that was the golden mean, that little circle there, and he uses that in his designs. And this is Wyoming Jade, just about 6 inches tall, and he won a second prize for this at that Jade Symposium where I won the t-shirt. And this is, he had, part of the contest was you had to show the rock that it came out of, or that was part of your entry into the contest, and that was his there. This is Matt Glasby. That's actually during a jade carving workshop. He still does jade carving workshops, and he's just an amazing carver. There's some Edwards black that he did. That's about 6 inches. I've seen that several times. And I think that goes for about $4,000 or $5,000 or something like that. This was an entry in a jade exposition in China. And he has a much modern entry. There's some cows. Okay, we're almost there. This is on the way to that picture with the alien flowers. I wound and wound and wound on, I think they're old uranium prospecting roads, and I just like, oh, so this one, it took me 2 hours to get like 20 miles. And I finally got close, and then there's a range gate and a bull. And the bull's like, oh, he's coming over, it's like spit just pouring out of his mouth. And I'm like, oh my God. Y'all know what a range gate is? It's a hole, or it's like a section of fence, and you pull off, you have to get out, pull off, and put it to the side, and then you drive through. So you're gonna be out doing that for at least like 5 minutes or something like that, and this bull's there. So I just got the car, I just got back in the Sequoia and started driving him, trying to hurt him, and he's like, he kind of went back. I'm honking the horn and everything, and he finally got, I don't know how far he was, but he was still pretty close. And I ran over, opened the range gate, got through, and I just barely, that was another close call in my life. I have a few of those. Yeah, are y'all holding up pretty good? I could just go to the end. We got about 10 more minutes. Okay. So this was at a jade carving workshop where Don Salt was there, and Matt Glasby and a bunch of Big Sur people, which is like, they're like kind of like a tribe. They had like this deer stew that they made that was unbelievable. I ended up meeting this guy who he used to grow things up in the hills there, and sell them to people, little packages kind of thing. That was a big, before, the legalization and all that kind of stuff. But he went there when he was 18 years old. I think he's probably in his mid-70s now. He ran away from home, Chicago, ended up on this river in called Willow Creek, which has wonderful nephrite in it, botryoidal. And he was living in San Francisco, and they said, hey, we're going to Big Sur, you want to go? I'm like, oh, okay. 18. They hike in this river. He took me to that spot. It's beautiful. It has trout even. And he said, I'm staying. And he raised kids there in this, without a road and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, it was a great cultural experience. So this is like just a quick thing on the jade carving process. The dolphins over there. This is a picture of a tile from Hearst Castle, and this actual tile, my mom's uncle built all the tiles for Hearst Castle, which is this extravagant mansion palace on the California coast. And so this always was on our kitchen counter, and as a kid I was like, what the heck is that thing? It's like, it turns out you see this pattern, this fish U-shaped pattern, even back in the Chinese time, so that's what I got inspired by. So this is Wyoming sage, which is not really translucent so much, but it is. But it's just really nice to carve. It's super homogeneous. And so I started out, I cut a slab that was kind of thick, and then I drew on it, and then I took this tile saw that has a nice diamond blade, and you cut with water, and so I cut out the little shape as best I can with that. Then I use a core drill to cut out that center part. This is all sort of in the, a lot of you have carved, I know. It's in the, how can I get through this quickly? Because if you're just using a grinding wheel, it takes forever. And there I am. This is what's called a point carver. So that your grinding tool is out here on a shaft that's rotating, and you take your piece and you move it around that grinding. This is all diamond coated grinding wheel. And then you can do fine detail with a hand piece, and it's kind of interesting. Chinese carvers use point carvers exclusively, Western people are just starting to use point carvers, and Chinese people are just starting to use the handpiece. Yeah, this is really, it's like $1,000 handpiece. It has a little micro motor, and they're really nice. You can really cut really well. And there's the final piece with the dial.
Oh,
Took me quite a while.
Good job.
There's one other step where you actually take like pieces of a grinding wheel and you cut little sticks out of them, and then you like smooth out all the little curves, really nice, and that's called sticking. And then you do like polish afterwards. Okay, this is the camp that is at a jade mine, and it's more like that jade, the first one that was the metasomatic also. And so we'll just close with that. And I think if I just go like this, did that work? There's actually a song to this, but whenever you have presentations, it doesn't, something's got to not work, right? So anyway, I got to spin, this is the Wyoming Jade, 20-pound boulder, about 2 or 3 inches of it were sticking out above the surface. Bob found it using a dowsing rod. Yeah, and you laugh, I mean, you talk to a lot of people that mine in Colorado and stuff like that, there's some that do. It's just like a water witch. I was really skeptical at first. But anyway, I spent a day with a stone and I just took a bunch of pictures of it. And then I have a piece here. I'm just about ready to make some kind of pendant out of it. But I've had that piece for probably 2 or 3 years. I just, sometimes you don't want to, it takes a while until you're ready to cut into a piece of jade. And he cut it up and sold a lot of pieces and saved the, yeah, we'll see it in a second. There's actually kind of like this lip that comes out and it looks like a wave. And I said, Bob, that's a wave. It's the Wyoming wave. And so he named it that. And you see I had fun taking a lot of pictures. 30 pans. I think that's like 12 inches, and there, yeah, it's got some nice translucency. There's the wave, and so he cut that off and he saved that for his collection. So he's still got the actual wave, and that's about this long and that high, like 12 inches by 1 inch. That's it. End of show.